We're all trying, aren't we, to get to that place. Total consciousness, being completely healed, aligned. It feels like the biggest mandate of our time. Think about that moment, that ritual. You take the empowered selfie, maybe showing something you're learning to accept, a soft belly maybe. You write this caption about your journey or radical acceptance, and just for a second there's this rush, not just likes, but this feeling of being morally, right, superior almost. But if we're being really honest, really honest with ourselves, that feeling gets shaky pretty fast. Because right before hitting post, there were those little tweaks, weren't there? Cropping out the stretch marks just there, adjusting the light just so, maybe dialing down that skin filter to a believable 10%. We call it self-expression, but there's always that little adjustment, that management of the truth.
And that adjustment, that tiny manipulation, that's exactly the tension we need to dig into today. You really hit on the central anxiety of modern life, haven't you? When we really look at it, the question becomes, why does this demand to love yourself, which sounds so freeing, right? Why does it actually feel so exhausting, so draining and anxiety-inducing for so many people? It's a paradox, isn't it? Often, the movements that promise the most liberation, they somehow twist and become the most controlling forces in our lives. What you're scrolling through, what we're all performing, it's often not pure self-expression. Psychologically speaking, it's closer to, well, it's the performance that happens when the repressed stuff starts bubbling back up, the return of the repressed, but make it aesthetic.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. Return of the repressed. Because the pressure, wow, it feels immense and it's so contradictory. On one side, you hear, your body is not an apology. Total freedom, radical acceptance, love it all. But then, your exact same feed pushes, like endless products suggesting the opposite. Waist trainers, glow-up challenges, detox teas, all whispering or sometimes shouting that you do need radical change to be, worthy, loved, successful. It feels like we have to hold two completely opposite ideas at once. Like, love yourself perfectly, right now, as you are, but also never stop optimizing, keep striving for that better future self. So what happens? Really, what happens if you wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and you just don't feel it? You don't love your reflection.
Well, what happens is you instantly become morally suspect, and that's the genius, but also the cruelty of this new moral framework we're living in. Body positivity, or at least how it often plays out. It didn't really dismantle the old beauty ideal, did it? It sort of just rebranded it, put a new coat of paint on it, and made loving yourself compulsory. So now if you feel disgust or envy, or if you genuinely want to change your body, you're not just having a bad day. You're seen as failing a spiritual test. You're part of the problem. You haven't done the work. You're clinging to internalized misogyny.
Right. So the standard didn't vanish. The shame just,
yeah,
it moved. It moved inside.
Exactly. Spot on. And this shift creates what we can analyze as the new superego. It's quite a brilliant cultural adaptation in a way. The superego, the psychoanalytic concept, it's that internal prosecutor,
right,
but it's not the old stern Victorian figure anymore. Oh no. This new one, it's dressed up in therapy speak. Trauma-informed language, pastel-colored affirmations on Instagram.
The prison walls got softer, maybe painted millennial pink, and the guards wear yoga pants and talk about holding space for your shame. It's your own internal critic, but it sounds like a wellness influencer.
That is the precise mechanism. It's uncanny. It doesn't need to shout or whip you into shape anymore. It whispers. It uses the language of wellness and self-help to keep you in line. It murmurs things like, you should be grateful for this body, or maybe you haven't done enough shadow work around this feeling, or this discomfort is just resistance you need to lean into. So the shame isn't coming from a magazine cover anymore, not directly. It's internal. It feels spiritual. And it's often reinforced by your own community, your online circles. You feel like you're failing a standard of enlightenment now, not just a physical one.
And it's so much harder to argue with that, isn't it? Shame dressed up as spiritual growth.
Much harder. It disarms critique.
Okay, so this brings me to the behavior itself, the actual actions we see, because this is where it gets really, really interesting and frankly confusing. You see that coach, right, the one with the visible six-pack, posting a video that's titled, why diet culture is toxic. Okay, fair enough. But then behind the scenes, maybe in the DMs, they're selling this proprietary, non-diet intuitive eating plan that just happens to consistently lead to weight loss for their clients. Or the influencer who makes a huge deal about never weighing themselves. They threw out the scale. Liberation. But somehow they look perfectly toned and sculpted, all year round, no fluctuations. To someone just looking, it seems like pure hypocrisy. Just own it, right? But you're suggesting this big contradiction. It's actually doing some kind of psychological work. It's necessary.
It's absolutely necessary for the person performing it. The hypocrisy you're seeing, that's the symptom. It's not the root cause. It's what happens because of the underlying conflict. We can understand this using a classic Freudian defense mechanism, reaction formation. Have you heard of this one?
Vaguely, but break it down in this context.
Okay, so reaction formation is basically when you have an impulse, a desire, that feels completely forbidden or unacceptable in your current social world. Let's say wanting to be thin purely for vanity's sake, or wanting external validation above all else. Because you feel you cannot consciously own or express that desire, it goes against the accepted script of empowerment and self-love. You unconsciously overcompensate. You perform the exact opposite of that desire. So because you're not allowed socially to say, God, I desperately want to fit the standard because I crave admiration and validation, you instead perform radical body acceptance, extreme acceptance. And crucially, you have to perform it louder, prouder, and more publicly than anyone else because the original forbidden desire, it didn't actually go away. It's still there under the surface, driving the performance. It just put on a really convincing costume made of wellness jargon and self-love quotes.
Wow. Okay. So it's like radical acceptance becomes the kind of psychological shield. And the louder the proclamation of freedom, maybe the harder that person is fighting an internal battle against the very thing they're denouncing.
Precisely. It's an overcompensation. And this inherent fragility, this tension between the performance and the hidden desire, explains why the performance must be so constant, so visible. If your whole public identity is built on rejecting something you secretly crave, you need that continuous external validation, the likes, the comments, the shares, to keep the whole structure from collapsing. Which brings us right back to the ritual of the post itself.
Right, the choreography. The modern sacrament, as you called it earlier, it's never just one quick, candid snap, is it? It's the taking 17 photos, maybe more, deleting 15 immediately, filtering the remaining 2 just enough, not too much, got to keep it authentic. Then finding that perfect quote from Audre Lorde or bell hooks to give it intellectual weight. And then hovering over the refresh button for the next hour, watching the likes trickle in.
Exactly. And this isn't just vanity, not in the simple sense. This is modern liturgy. It truly functions like a religious ritual for validating self-worth. It's mediated through screens, the altar of our time. And its success is measured in engagement metrics. That underlying primal desire, the wish to be seen, to be chosen, to be desired, to feel worthy, gets translated into this quantifiable digital currency of attraction, likes, shares, comments, a little fire emojis, that little dopamine hit you get when someone comments, "You're glowing," or "So inspiring." That's the desire being momentarily met. The transaction is complete for now. The ritual worked.
And the language we use around all this, it's shifted so dramatically. It feels like there's a whole new vocabulary we have to use. Like, you can't just say, I want to look hot, or I want people to find me desirable. No. You have to say, I'm reclaiming my sensuality, or I'm stepping into my personal power. You can't say, wow, I'm actually really jealous of her body. You're supposed to say, I celebrate her journey while compassionately working on dismantling my own competitive conditioning. I mean, is this genuine growth? Or is it just really sophisticated avoidance, a way to talk around the raw thing?
It's largely avoidance, I would argue. But it's avoidance that's been brilliantly repackaged as growth. This points to another key psychological mechanism at play: sublimation. Sublimation is when the ego takes raw, messy, potentially taboo impulses and redirects them into socially acceptable, even admirable channels. It's about civilizing the id, essentially. The core impulse, the libido, that raw life force, the hunger for connection, for validation, for heat that hasn't fundamentally changed. What's changed is the vocabulary we use, the channels we pour it into. So wanting cosmetic surgery isn't just vanity anymore. It's framed as investing in your self-care or aligning your outer self with your inner self. Wanting to look like the models in the ads becomes curating your personal aesthetic, or creating a vision board for your highest self, or honoring your vessel.
We're spiritualizing the drive.
Exactly. We're spiritualizing the raw hunger. We rename the desire for attention and attraction as a desire for community, connection, or visibility. But the engine driving the car, it's still the same powerful primal force, libido.
Okay, that sublimation idea. It also helps explain something else I see constantly, which is the intense aggression that sometimes surfaces in these spaces. Like, why is there such fierce judgment aimed at other people who maybe do admit they want to change their bodies, or who get lip filler, or whatever it is? You see people jump down their throats calling it internalized misogyny, a betrayal of the sisterhood. Why does someone else's choice feel like such a personal affront?
Ah, yes, the projection trap. This is classic projection, and it really shows the underlying fragility of the whole performative self-love structure we've been talking about. When someone reacts with that level of rage towards another person's aesthetic choices, chances are they aren't really mad at that person. They're mad at the part of themselves that still secretly wants what that person has or what that person represents. They're mad at the simple, raw desire within themselves, the desire for thinness or youth or conventional attractiveness that they've had to work so hard to bury beneath layers of sophisticated wellness language and radical acceptance rhetoric. When someone else is just honest about wanting those things or just goes ahead and gets the filler without the elaborate justification, their honesty inadvertently exposes the performance of others as performance, as theater. It holds up a mirror, and that's deeply uncomfortable.
Wow. So the anger isn't really about her choices. It's about the threat her honesty poses to my carefully constructed identity.
Precisely. The ego's favorite magic trick. Take what you hate or fear in yourself, project it onto someone else, and then attack it vigorously over there. It makes you feel righteous, morally superior, and safely distanced from your own uncomfortable truths.
So this whole body positivity, self-love movement, it's not just about bodies at all, is it? It's become a kind of battleground over who gets to want what, who is allowed to openly express desire, and in what language.
Absolutely. And if we tie this all back to that deeper drive we mentioned, libido, it becomes even clearer. Remember, libido isn't just sex drive. In a broader psychoanalytic sense, it's the life force, the energy, the hunger to connect, to be seen, to be wanted, to feel alive and validated. Every curated post, every perfectly angled selfie captioned with vulnerability, the engine behind it isn't just seeking community or visibility in the abstract, it's seeking a return of libido. Every share, every affirming comment is like a little hit of that life force coming back at you. What the movement inadvertently did was commodify not just the body, but libido itself. It turned that raw, messy, sometimes desperate human hunger for connection and validation into content. Profitable, aesthetically pleasing content. The unconscious mind doesn't really care about the hashtags or the font on the affirmation graphic. It wants the real thing. Skin, breath, touch, heat, genuine connection, being truly seen. But if it can't get that, it learns to settle for the next best thing, the digital representation, the aesthetic validation, the quantified approval of the algorithm and the audience.
When you lay it all out like that, the main thing that stands out to me is just the sheer consequence, the weight of it all. We have this generation, my generation, that is more articulate about self-care, self-love, trauma, boundaries, all of it, than any generation in history. We have the language. And yet simultaneously, we see more anxious, more burnt out, more utterly exhausted by the relentless performance of these very ideals than ever before. It feels like we're fluent in the theory of self-love, but quietly, deeply miserable in its daily execution.
That's the profound irony, isn't it? We set out perhaps with good intentions. We wanted to free ourselves from the oppressive gaze, the old standards, but instead of escaping it, we seem to have simply internalized it. We took the judge inside, gave it a makeover, and renamed it self-love, or my personal growth journey. We didn't actually reject the standards, we just learned to aestheticize our rebellion against them. We turned the resistance itself into a new kind of required content, a new standard to perform. So the real repression now, it's maybe not about hiding the cellulite or the stretch marks anymore. We got good at performing the acceptance of those. The deeper repression is hiding the desire itself, hiding that primal, simple, maybe even basic wish to just be wanted, chosen, admired, found attractive in a conventional sense.
Because admitting that feels like the real failure now.
Exactly. The deep hidden shame today isn't necessarily about having a body that doesn't measure up to some external ideal. It's about the shame of admitting, even to yourself, that a part of you still wants your body to measure up. Because that feels like a failure of enlightenment, a failure of the mandated self-love.
So, where does that leave us? What's the way through this exhaustion?
Well, maybe the most radical question we can ask ourselves, the one that cuts through all the performance, is this. What if true liberation isn't finally achieving perfect, unwavering, Instagram-ready love for your body on command? What if, instead, liberation is simply being allowed to feel whatever the hell you actually feel about it on any given day? Disgust, neutrality, acceptance, pride, envy, indifference, whatever it is. Feeling it without the immediate pressure to perform the correct, enlightened response. Without the moral judgment either from others or, more importantly, from yourself.
What if freedom isn't found in crafting the perfect caption about the journey, but maybe just in the silence after you close the app? And the only real revolution needed is just a quiet moment of honesty with yourself.
Precisely. Maybe the goal isn't relentless performed self-love after all. Maybe the goal is simpler and harder, just to stop lying. Stop lying to ourselves about what we want, what we fear, what we hunger for. Because until we stop dressing up that deep, messy human desire in the borrowed robes of empowerment or spiritual journeys, it's just going to keep leaking out anyway. It'll leak out in the filters we choose, the comparisons we can't stop making, the subtle manipulations in the photos, and in that quiet, persistent, shameful thought we refuse to post. What if, after all this work, I'm still not quite enough?